You wake up on the most important day of your life, except you've already lived it once before. You died. Brutally. At the hands of someone you trusted. But here's the kicker, you're back, and this time, you can hear everyone's thoughts. Every lie, every scheme, every dark secret running through their minds like an open book. That's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, what I discovered about the people closest to me will make your skin crawl. See, I thought I knew how this story would end. I thought I was the victim, the one who got dealt the worst hand. But sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you think is your enemy might actually be your salvation. Let me take you back to where it all began, the day that changed everything twice. I opened my eyes that morning, and immediately something felt wrong. Not wrong like, I forgot to set my alarm, wrong, but wrong like I've lived this exact moment before. And it ended with me dying wrong. The sunlight was streaming through my bedroom window at the exact same angle, hitting the exact same spot on my dresser where I'd left my jewelry the night before. But that was impossible because I distinctly remembered dying 6 months ago. The memories came flooding back like a dam bursting open. My sister Sophia, sweet innocent Sophia, ramming her car into me while I was walking out of a shopping center. The impact, the pain, the darkness, and most importantly, the look in her eyes just before she hit the gas, pure, unadulterated hatred. But here I was very much alive, staring at my calendar that read the same date from over a year ago. The day we were supposed to choose our husbands. Now I know what you're thinking. Choose our husbands? What is this, the 1800s? Trust me, I had the same reaction the first time around. But when you're born into one of those old money families where business deals are sealed with marriage contracts, you don't get much say in how your life unfolds. My father had arranged for Sophia and me to meet 2 brothers from the Carter family, a merger disguised as romance. As I sat there trying to process this impossible situation, I heard something that made my blood run cold. This time I have to grab the best husband before she does. I spun around looking for Sophia, but she wasn't in my room. The voice had been clear as day, but there was no one there. Then it hit me, I had heard her thoughts. Somehow, along with getting a second chance at life, I'd gained the ability to hear what people were really thinking. And if Sophia was thinking about grabbing the best husband this time, that meant she remembered everything too. She had also been reborn. The realization sent chills down my spine. In my previous life, I had married Ethan Carter, the gentle younger brother who treated me like a princess. Meanwhile, Sophia had been stuck with Logan Carter, the cold, emotionally distant older brother who everyone whispered about. The servants used to gossip about how he would beat her, how she could never please him, how she lived in constant fear. I had felt sorry for her then. I had thought I was the lucky one. But if she was plotting to take Ethan away from me this time around, what did that tell me about my perfect marriage? What dark secrets had I been blind to? I rushed downstairs to the dining room where the meeting was supposed to take place. Both Carter brothers were already seated at the long mahogany table, looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Logan sat rigidly upright, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. Even from across the room, he radiated an intimidating presence that made people instinctively keep their distance. Ethan, on the other hand, looked like someone had ordered the approachable boyfriend from a catalog. Soft features, warm smile, the kind of guy who probably helped old ladies cross the street and rescued stray puppies. In my first life, I had fallen for that gentle facade completely. Sophia bounced into the room like she was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial, all bright smiles and nervous energy. But I could hear the calculating thoughts running through her mind. Just wait, I'm going to take you away this time. She was staring directly at Ethan, and her mental voice was dripping with determination. Without hesitation, she practically skipped over to his side of the table and plopped down next to him like she belonged there. "Hi, my name is Sophia Evans," she said with a shy giggle that I now recognized as completely fake. "I like you." The words were barely out of her mouth when my father cleared his throat with the authority of someone used to making decisions that changed lives. "Susan, since your sister has already chosen Ethan Carter, then you will marry Logan Carter." I watched Sophia's face light up with satisfaction, and her thoughts hit me like a slap across the face. "This time you can take the beatings for me." That's when everything clicked into place. The beatings everyone had whispered about. They weren't random acts of violence from an abusive husband. They were punishments. In families like the Carters, there were rules, and breaking those rules had consequences. But what had Sophia done to deserve such treatment? More importantly, if she was so eager to escape Logan and desperate to be with Ethan, what kind of hell was waiting for me with the man I had thought was perfect? "All right, Dad," I said, forcing a smile. "I actually like Logan too." The lie rolled off my tongue easily, but as I walked over to sit beside Logan Carter, I felt like I was walking toward my own execution. The man radiated coldness like a personal air conditioning unit. His presence was so intimidating that I could feel my palms getting sweaty just from being near him. But then something unexpected happened. As I settled into the chair next to him, I tried to listen to his thoughts the same way I had with Sophia. Nothing. Complete silence. It was like trying to tune into a radio station that didn't exist. Meanwhile, when I focused on Ethan, who was smiling warmly at Sophia, his thoughts came through crystal clear. "What a beautiful little doll." The words themselves weren't particularly alarming, but something about the way his mental voice sounded made my skin crawl. There was a possessiveness to it, a hunger that felt wrong coming from someone who was supposed to be gentle and kind. On pure instinct, I reached out and grabbed Logan's hand. His skin was surprisingly warm, a stark contrast to his cold demeanor. The moment our fingers touched, he turned to look at me with those piercing dark eyes. I quickly let go, and he went back to his stoic silence. Even though Logan seemed like he could freeze hell over with a single glance, sitting next to him felt infinitely safer than the alternative. Whatever darkness was hiding behind Ethan's gentle mask, I had no desire to discover it again. The wedding preparations began immediately, because apparently when you're sealing business deals with marriage, there's no time for long engagements or second thoughts. Sophia and I were both scheduled to marry on the same day, in the same venue, because the Carter family believed in efficiency above all else. As the days leading up to the wedding passed, I started to piece together fragments of my previous life that I had either forgotten or chosen to ignore. Little moments that hadn't seemed significant at the time, but now painted a very different picture of my supposedly perfect marriage. I remembered how Ethan would sometimes look at me with an expression I had mistaken for adoration, but now realized was more like a collector admiring a prized possession. I remembered how he would insist on choosing my clothes, my food, even my friends. I had thought he was being caring and attentive. Now I understood he was being controlling. Most disturbing of all, I remembered the basement in our house, his private space that I was never allowed to enter. He had told me it was his workshop, where he tinkered with inventions and needed absolute privacy to concentrate. But now I recalled glimpses I had caught of strange vials filled with colorful liquids, syringes, and equipment that looked more suited to a laboratory than a hobby room. The morning of the wedding arrived like a death sentence with a white dress and flower arrangements. Just like in my previous life, Logan was nowhere to be found. Ethan, meanwhile, showed up at the crack of dawn in a pristine white suit, looking like Prince Charming ready to sweep his bride off her feet. As he carried Sophia down the stairs, she shot me a look of pure triumph mixed with malicious glee. "Susan, where's Logan? Didn't he come to pick you up?" she asked with fake concern, but her thoughts were screaming with satisfaction. "No need for you to worry, Sophia. Just take care of yourself," I replied calmly. Her face darkened at my composed response. She had expected me to be humiliated, to break down crying or storm off in anger like I had in my previous life. Instead, I was standing there looking perfectly serene, which clearly wasn't part of her plan. "Go ahead and laugh now. Let's see if you'll still be laughing when you're the one getting beaten," she thought viciously as Ethan whisked her away. But I had learned something important from my first wedding day. The Carter family valued composure and dignity above all else. When Logan had failed to show up the first time, I had reacted with tears and anger, giving everyone something to gossip about and marking me as weak in the eyes of the family matriarch, Mrs. Carter. This time I had a different strategy. When the guests began murmuring about the absent groom, I calmly picked up the microphone and addressed the crowd with a confident smile. "Logan had an important business deal to negotiate today, so I'll be making the rounds in his place for the wedding toast. I hope you all won't mind." The whispers stopped immediately. From the head table, I caught Mrs. Carter nodding with what looked like approval. She was a woman who understood the importance of maintaining face, and I had just demonstrated that I could handle a crisis with grace and dignity. Sophia, meanwhile, was watching this unfold with growing irritation. Her thoughts were practically screaming at me. Disgusting. Just wait. When it's time for the tea ceremony, I'll make sure you embarrass yourself. The tea ceremony was a Carter family tradition where the new daughters-in-law would serve tea to the family elders as a sign of respect and acceptance. It was also apparently where Sophia planned to sabotage me. As I approached Mrs. Carter with the delicate porcelain tea set, I could hear Sophia counting down in her mind like she was timing a bomb. 3, 2, 1. At the last second, I sidestepped slightly, just enough to avoid whatever trap she had set. Instead of me stumbling and spilling tea everywhere, Sophia somehow lost her balance and crashed to the floor, soaking her wedding dress and covering herself in the expensive tea blend. The entire room turned to stare at the spectacle. Mrs. Carter's face darkened with displeasure as she looked down at her newest daughter-in-law sprawled on the floor in a puddle of tea. So reckless. Do you even look like a proper daughter-in-law? Ethan rushed to help Sophia up, but I could hear his thoughts clearly. What an idiot. The words were sharp and cruel, completely at odds with the concerned expression on his face. It was like watching someone wear a mask of kindness while their true nature rotted underneath. I'm sorry, Mother, it wasn't on purpose, Sophia stammered, trying to salvage what was left of her dignity, but the damage was done. Mrs. Carter's first impression had been set, and in a family like the Carters, first impressions were everything. The wedding reception ended in an atmosphere of awkward tension, with most guests whispering behind their hands about the clumsy new bride who couldn't even serve tea properly. But when Mrs. Carter turned to me, her expression was warm and approving. Susan, tonight I'll make sure Logan comes home to keep you company. He should make it up to you. True to her word, Logan actually showed up that evening. I heard his key in the lock around 10 p.m., and when he walked through the door, he looked absolutely exhausted. His usually perfect hair was slightly mussed, his tie was loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd been working for hours. I immediately went to help him with his jacket, playing the role of the dutiful wife. Logan, you must be tired today, I said gently. He glanced at me briefly but didn't respond. His silence wasn't hostile exactly, but it wasn't welcoming either. It was like he was evaluating me, trying to figure out what kind of person he'd been saddled with. While he went to shower, I busied myself preparing the bedroom for what I assumed would be an incredibly awkward wedding night. I fluffed the pillows on his bed, set out fresh towels, and arranged some tea and light snacks on the nightstand. Then I grabbed a spare blanket and set up a little sleeping area for myself on the couch. When Logan emerged from the bathroom, dressed in a simple bathrobe with his dark hair still damp, he stopped short at the sight of the sleeping arrangements. Susan, are you trying to play hard to get? He asked, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. I had to admit, the man was ridiculously good-looking. The bathrobe hung open just enough to reveal a perfectly sculpted chest, and water droplets were still clinging to his skin. For a moment, I understood why romance novels always described heroes emerging from showers in such dramatic detail. But I quickly averted my gaze and focused on the conversation at hand. We have no real feelings for each other. Sharing a bed would be awkward for both of us. If possible, I'd like to propose a partnership. His eyebrow arched slightly. What do you mean? After all, our marriage is just a business arrangement. Plenty of couples in our situation live separate lives and only put on a show for appearances. I married you simply to ensure a stable and comfortable life. I don't expect love. Logan studied me for a long moment, and I could see something shifting in his expression. Then he smiled, not a warm, friendly smile, but something sharper and more calculating. You're smart. That works for me too. I can agree to that. It was a relief to know that we were on the same page. I wasn't equipped to handle the emotional complexities of a real marriage, especially not with someone as intimidating as Logan Carter. A business partnership I could manage. The next morning, Logan was up before dawn doing some kind of workout routine that involved a lot of push-ups and weights. I woke up to the sound of his controlled breathing and the rhythmic thud of exercise equipment. Through half-closed eyes, I watched him move through his routine with military precision. The man was built like a Greek statue come to life. Every muscle was perfectly defined, and he moved with the kind of fluid strength that suggested years of disciplined training. It was hard to reconcile this powerful, clearly capable man with the stories I'd heard about him being emotionally weak or unstable. Stop staring. I'm not interested in you. he said suddenly, not even pausing in his routine. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment at being caught. Get ready. Let's go eat breakfast. The morning routine was clearly designed to maintain appearances. We walked to the dining room together, sat side by side, and exchanged polite conversation like a couple who actually enjoyed each other's company. Logan even pulled out my chair and served me food. Small gestures that would fuel gossip about how well we were getting along. It was during this performance that we encountered Sophia and Ethan. They approached our table holding hands, and I immediately noticed something was off about Sophia's appearance. She was wearing a strapless dress that showed off her shoulders and collarbone, but instead of looking elegant, she looked like she was trying too hard to appear sexy. More importantly, her skin was covered in what looked like small bruises and marks. My first instinct was to assume they were love bites, evidence of passionate newlywed activities. But as I looked closer, some of the marks looked too precise, too deliberate. They reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite place what. Sophia's thoughts hit me like a bucket of ice water. She's completely covered up. She must have been beaten last night and is trying to hide the bruises. The smugness in her mental voice was nauseating. She genuinely believed that I was suffering the same fate she had endured in our previous life, and she was enjoying every moment of it. Susan, how was your wedding night? She asked with false sweetness, but her eyes were scanning my long-sleeved dress like she was looking for evidence of violence. That's when it occurred to me to put her in her place using the very family rules that had governed her punishment in our previous life. Sophia, based on seniority in the Carter family, you should be addressing me as sister-in-law, not sister. Her face immediately darkened. She clenched her teeth, clearly struggling with the requirement to show proper respect. Even Logan never calls you that. What right do you have to demand it from me? She snapped. The temperature around our table seemed to drop several degrees as Logan's expression turned glacial. Tell me, Ethan, he said in a voice so calm it was terrifying. What is the first rule of the Carter family? Ethan's face went pale instantly. He knew exactly what his brother was referring to, and he knew the consequences of violating family rules.
I'm sorry, Logan.
I'll handle it right away. Without hesitation, Ethan slapped Sophia hard across the face. The sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Show proper respect. Greet your brother and sister-in-law properly. Sophia's hand flew to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and fury. But she understood that defying Logan directly would result in even worse punishment. Good morning, brother. Good morning, sister-in-law, she forced out through gritted teeth. As soon as the words left her mouth, Ethan grabbed her arm and dragged her away from our table. But not before I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach turn. Under the table, hidden from view, Ethan was holding what looked like a small needle. And as they walked away, I could see him pressing it into Sophia's hand repeatedly, causing her to flinch with each jab. The realization hit me like a freight train. Those marks on her skin weren't love bites or even traditional bruises from hitting. They were needle marks. Ethan was injecting her with something, and from the look of pain and fear in her eyes, it wasn't pleasant. You worthless woman, it's all your fault that I had to endure this humiliation. I heard his thoughts as clearly as if he had spoken aloud. In that moment, I understood why Sophia had been so desperate to escape her marriage to Ethan, and why she had been willing to kill both of us to get away from him. The gentle, caring husband I had thought I'd married in my previous life was actually a sadistic monster, who used his medical knowledge to torture his wife in ways that wouldn't leave obvious evidence. Those colorful vials in his basement weren't for innocent experiments. They were tools of abuse, designed to cause pain, confusion, or compliance without leaving traditional marks that might alert others to what was happening. Mrs. Carter arrived for breakfast shortly after, and her reaction to Sophia's appearance was immediate and harsh. Shameless. What you do as a couple is your own business, but you are not to speak of such things in public. And don't ever dress so indecently again, you're humiliating the family. She actually struck Sophia with her walking cane, adding another layer of punishment to what was clearly becoming a nightmare existence. Meanwhile, Logan calmly placed food on my plate and made quiet conversation, playing the role of the attentive husband. To outside observers, we looked like the perfect couple, while Sophia appeared to be the problematic daughter-in-law who couldn't follow basic family rules. After breakfast, Mrs. Carter turned to me with approval. Susan, after lunch you should go to the company with Logan and start learning. As the eldest daughter-in-law of the Carter family, you need to understand the business. This was exactly what I had been hoping for. In my previous life, this same opportunity had been offered to Sophia, but she had rejected it, saying she didn't want to work and could just rely on Logan for everything. She had voluntarily given up the chance to gain financial independence and knowledge that could have protected her. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. Of course, Mom, I replied obediently. Logan took me to the Carter family's main office building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the city skyline. His office was on the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city below. "Wait here," he said curtly, then disappeared into a conference room where I could see him meeting with several men in expensive suits. Through the glass walls, I watched Logan negotiate what appeared to be a complex business deal. He was completely in his element, commanding the room with an authority that was both impressive and slightly intimidating. This was clearly a man who was used to getting what he wanted. One of the men he was meeting with was obviously foreign British, based on his accent that I could hear even through the glass. They were discussing some kind of formula or product, with the British man making grand gestures and Logan listening with skeptical interest. Curiosity got the better of me, and I slipped closer to the conference room door so I could hear more clearly. The British man was presenting what he claimed was a revolutionary skincare formula, something that would supposedly transform the cosmetics industry. He was asking for $3 million for the rights to produce and distribute it. But as I focused on his thoughts, I heard something completely different. "This formula is only worth a few hundred yuan. This time, I'll make sure to rip the Carter family off." The contrast between his confident presentation and his greedy inner thoughts was staggering. He was essentially trying to sell Logan a near-worthless product for an enormous sum of money, banking on the Carter family's reputation for making smart investments. I couldn't let Logan fall for this scam, especially not when he had been nothing but fair to me so far. Without thinking, I pushed open the conference room door and walked in. "Hello," I said in English, addressing the British man directly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing your presentation." I picked up the sample bottle of skincare serum he had brought and examined it closely, drawing on knowledge I had gained from years of reading beauty magazines and trying various products. I'm a woman, so I understand skincare products better than most. Your formula only contains basic whitening ingredients. It doesn't have any anti-aging or wrinkle-reducing properties, and the whitening effects are minimal at best. So tell me, why exactly is this formula worth $3 million? The British man's face went through several shades of red and purple. Logan leaned back in his chair, watching the interaction with obvious interest but not interrupting. I continued, pressing my advantage. "Since this is supposedly a foreign product and you've done quite a bit of promotion on social media, I'll acknowledge that your brand has some value. So I'll offer you this amount." I held up one finger. $1 million, Logan said, clearly thinking I was indicating that number. No, I corrected quickly. 100,000. For a formula that's barely worth a few hundred yuan, 100,000 is already quite generous. The silence in the room was deafening. The British man stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. "Miss, who are you to name such a price? How am I supposed to do business like this? Fine, I won't sell it. It's not like you must have it." He turned toward the door, clearly expecting Logan to chase after him with a better offer. Instead, Logan's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Jack, I'll give you $1 million. Sign the contract now, and I expect you to apologize to my wife." Jack froze mid-step, then immediately spun around with dollar signs practically visible in his eyes. "Mr. Carter, you're a real businessman," he said with renewed enthusiasm, then turned to me with a forced smile. "I apologize, Mrs. Carter. I didn't realize you were Mr. Carter's wife." After Jack left to sign the paperwork, I turned to Logan in confusion. That formula was only worth a few $100s. Why did you pay him $1 million? Logan took a sip of his coffee, looking completely relaxed despite having just spent a fortune on what I knew was a near-worthless product. His piercing gaze made me feel like he could see straight through to my soul. For someone who couldn't read minds, he was remarkably good at reading people. "Of course not," I said with what I hoped was a convincing smile. I just want to find something to do. He studied me for another long moment, then nodded. Fine, but you need to learn from me first. For the next few days, you'll shadow me and observe how I handle different situations. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into learning everything I could about business, relationships, and the complex social dynamics of the Carter family world. Logan turned out to be an excellent teacher, though his methods were often unconventional. He would take me to business dinners where I learned to read the subtle power plays happening between supposedly friendly colleagues. He showed me how to analyze financial reports, spot potential problems before they became crises, and negotiate deals that benefited everyone involved. Most importantly, he taught me that success in business wasn't just about money. It was about understanding people, anticipating their needs and motivations, and positioning yourself as someone they wanted to work with rather than against. One evening, Logan surprised me by suggesting we go out for dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city. It was the kind of place where reservations had to be made months in advance and a single meal cost more than most people made in a week. I was puzzled by this sudden gesture until we walked into the restaurant and immediately spotted Sophia and Ethan at a corner table. Sophia was cutting Ethan's steak for him like he was a child, but the moment she saw us enter, her entire demeanor changed. She practically threw down her knife and fork, looking startled and angry. "Susan, you're here too," she blurted out, then quickly corrected herself. "I mean, brother, sister-in-law, you're here for dinner as well?" Her thoughts were screaming at me. What the hell? Of all times, why did I have to run into her now? I can't lose face. "Yes," I replied with a sweet smile. "Logan and I came to have dinner together." As I spoke, I deliberately slipped my arm through Logan's. He didn't pull away or seem uncomfortable with the contact, which I took as a good sign. Ethan stepped forward and greeted us properly, but I could see the tension in his jaw and the way his hands were clenched into fists. Being forced to show respect to his older brother clearly grated on him, especially in public. Logan led me to a table without acknowledging them further, but I caught the look of pure fury in Sophia's eyes as she watched us. She was probably wondering why Logan hadn't beaten me into submission yet, why he was taking me to expensive restaurants instead of locking me in the basement. When I excused myself to go to the restroom, I wasn't surprised to find Sophia waiting for me outside the door. Her expression was murderous, reminiscent of the look she'd had just before ramming her car into me in our previous life. "You must be getting beaten up behind closed doors," she snarled. "Stop pretending. Just looking at you makes me sick." As she spoke, my eyes were drawn to her arms, which were covered in small puncture wounds that looked fresh and painful. "Oh my, Sophia," I said with mock concern. "What happened to your arm? So many needle marks." Her face went pale with panic as she quickly tried to cover the evidence. "None of your business. It's just something fun between Ethan and me," she snapped, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. She was trying to maintain the facade that her marriage was passionate and exciting, but the truth was written all over her body in the form of injection sites and barely healed wounds. "That's wonderful," I said with a bright smile. "I wish you both a lifetime of happiness." I turned to leave, but she suddenly grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked hard, her mask of civility finally slipping completely. "Are you mocking me?" she screamed. Before I could respond, Logan appeared out of nowhere. Without hesitation, he grabbed Sophia's wrist and twisted it until she released my hair, then shoved her away from me with enough force to send her stumbling backward. "Disrespecting your sister-in-law?" he said in a voice so cold it could have frozen fire. "Do you know what the punishment for that is?" Sophia's face went white as she remembered the Carter family's rules about hierarchy and respect. The punishment for disrespecting the heir's wife was confinement in the underground detention area, a place I remembered all too well from my previous life. It was a basement room filled with rats, cockroaches, snakes, and other creatures that most people only encountered in nightmares. The walls were damp, the air was stale, and the only light came from a single bare bulb that was turned on for maybe an hour each day. "Brother, I didn't mean to. Please don't do this," Sophia begged, but Logan's expression remained unmoved. "Ethan, take her away," he ordered. As Ethan dragged a sobbing Sophia out of the restaurant, I heard his thoughts clearly. "Hope she dies in there. Less trouble for me." The man who was supposed to love and protect his wife was actually hoping for her death. It was a level of cruelty that made my stomach turn, even knowing what kind of person Sophia had become. Logan and I returned home in silence, but once we were in our bedroom, he gently examined my scalp where Sophia had pulled my hair. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I'm fine," I said, brushing his hand away before the contact could become too intimate. "She just pulled my hair a little." Logan's dark eyes met mine. "Why did you get into an argument with her again?" I hesitated, not wanting to explain the complex web of reincarnation, mind reading, and family vendettas that had led to this moment. She told me that she and Ethan are intimate every night and that they're very happy, unlike you who won't even touch me. That's why we argued. Logan's expression darkened slightly. "So are you hinting at something?" I immediately realized he had misunderstood me and started waving my hands in panic. No, that's not what I meant. I was just explaining why we argued." He studied me intently. "Susan, have you ever thought about doing that with me?" "Of course not." I blurted out without thinking. "I told you I only want to rely on you for a stable life. That's all." "That's all," he pressed. I nodded firmly, but something in his expression told me I had said the wrong thing. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I had no idea what I had done to upset him, and honestly, I didn't have the emotional energy to figure it out. My focus needed to remain on building my own financial security and independence. The next day, instead of taking me to his office, Logan sent me to manage one of the Carter family's branch companies on my own. It was exactly what I had been hoping for. A chance to prove myself and start building my own wealth. I threw myself into the work with everything I had. Every day, I chased down new projects, negotiated deals with suppliers, and worked to bring in profits that would establish my value to the family. Mrs. Carter even allowed me to take a percentage of the earnings directly, which meant I was finally building my own nest egg. For the first time since my reincarnation, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. I wasn't relying on anyone else's goodwill or protection. I was creating my own security through hard work and smart business decisions. But just as I was starting to feel confident about my future, Sophia was released from the underground detention area. She had lost a significant amount of weight during her confinement, but she was still meticulously groomed and dressed in expensive clothes. The experience had clearly affected her, but she was trying to maintain the appearance that everything was fine. "Sister-in-law," she said sweetly as she approached me after work one day, "I've already asked Mom for permission to learn the business from you. I want to help ease your workload." Her words sounded reasonable and humble, but her thoughts told a completely different story. "Very soon, I'll make sure you and Logan die together." The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. In my previous life, Logan had died suddenly and mysteriously. Everyone had assumed it was a heart attack or some kind of medical emergency, but now I understood the truth. Ethan had poisoned him. And this time they weren't just planning to kill Logan, they wanted me dead too. "Great, you can start tomorrow," I said with a smile, pretending I hadn't heard her murderous thoughts. I needed to know exactly what they were planning so I could counter it effectively. The best way to do that was to keep Sophia close and listen to her mental plotting. Sure enough, over the next few days I heard enough details to piece together their entire scheme. Sophia's thoughts revealed that Ethan had been experimenting with various poisons in his basement laboratory for years. In our previous life, he had used a slow-acting toxin that mimicked the symptoms of a heart attack, making Logan's death appear natural. This time they planned to use something faster and more lethal. Something that would kill both Logan and me before anyone could intervene. But there was another layer to their plan that I hadn't expected. Sophia wasn't just working with Ethan. She was planning to betray him too. "Once Logan and Susan are dead, I'll poison Ethan and take control of everything myself," her thoughts revealed during a particularly vivid mental monologue. "I'll finally have the power and freedom I deserve." It was a triple murder plot wrapped inside a double cross, and Sophia genuinely believed she was clever enough to pull it off. I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I couldn't handle this alone. As much as I valued my independence, this was a situation that required backup. The question was, should I warn Logan? Part of me hesitated because our relationship was still purely transactional. We had an arrangement that benefited both of us, But I wasn't sure if he would believe such an outlandish story, or if he would think I was trying to manipulate him for some reason. On the other hand, if I let him die, I would lose my protection within the Carter family and probably end up dead myself. From a purely practical standpoint, keeping Logan alive was in my best interest. But there was something else, something I didn't want to admit even to myself. Over the weeks we had spent working together, I had started to genuinely respect Logan. He was intelligent, fair in his business dealings, and despite his cold exterior, he had never once treated me poorly. When Sophia had attacked me at the restaurant, he had protected me without hesitation. Maybe it was time to trust him with the truth. I found Logan in his office the next evening, working late as usual. The city lights stretched out below us through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a backdrop that made the conversation feel even more surreal. "Logan, I need to tell you something important, and I need you to hear me out completely before you respond." He looked up from his paperwork, immediately sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What is it?" I took a deep breath and decided to start with the most believable part of my story. "Ethan and Sophia are planning to kill you. Kill both of us, actually." His expression didn't change, but I saw his hands still on the documents he'd been reviewing. "Do you have any proof?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a recording I had made earlier that day. I had deliberately provoked a conversation with Ethan about our relationship, and managed to get him to admit his plans on tape. The recording started with me approaching Ethan while Sophia was busy with paperwork in another room. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something," my recorded voice said. "What is it, sister-in-law?" his voice responded, though I could hear the sarcasm in his tone. I think I'm falling for you," I had said, forcing myself to sound vulnerable and confused. Being married to Logan is so cold and lonely. I keep thinking about what it would be like to be with someone who actually cares about people. There was a pause on the recording, then Ethan's voice became warmer, more interested. "Sister-in-law, that's dangerous talk. What if Logan heard you?" "That's the thing," I had continued. "I don't think I can keep pretending to be happy with him. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if he just wasn't around anymore." "That's an interesting thought," Ethan had replied, and I could hear the excitement creeping into his voice. "You know, accidents happen all the time in business. Hostile takeovers, poisonings disguised as heart attacks, that sort of thing." "Poisonings?" I had asked, feigning innocence. "Oh yes, it's surprisingly easy if you know what you're doing. A little something in the food or drink and within hours it looks like natural causes. I've been experimenting with different compounds for years." The recording continued with Ethan describing his various poison formulas in disturbing detail, clearly trying to impress what he thought was a potential accomplice and lover. Logan listened to the entire recording in silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "When did you record this?" he asked when it finished. "This afternoon. I suspected something was wrong because of how Sophia has been acting, so I decided to investigate. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was close enough. I certainly wasn't ready to explain the mind-reading or reincarnation aspects of the situation." Logan leaned back in his chair, processing everything he had heard. "So my brother wants to kill me, and he's planning to use you as an accomplice?" "That's what he thinks, but I have no intention of helping him. I came to warn you because—" I paused, trying to find the right words. "Because despite everything, you've been fair to me. You've given me opportunities to build my own future, and you've never tried to control or manipulate me. I don't want to see you hurt." For a long moment, Logan just stared at me. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. Not his usual calculating expression, but something that seemed almost genuine. "You're more loyal than I expected, Susan. Most people in your position would try to play both sides and see who came out on top." "I'm not most people," I replied. "No," he agreed. "You're definitely not." Logan stood up and began pacing behind his desk, clearly working through various scenarios in his mind. "If Ethan is planning to poison us, he'll probably try to do it at a family dinner where he can control the food and make it look like an accident. The question is when and how we should respond." "Actually," I said carefully, "I think I might have a way to turn this situation to our advantage." I explained my plan, which involved letting Ethan think I was cooperating with him while actually feeding him false information and setting him up for failure. It was risky, but if it worked, we could eliminate the threat permanently while making it look like Ethan had been caught trying to commit murder. Logan listened intently, occasionally asking questions or suggesting modifications to the strategy. By the time we finished planning, it was nearly midnight, and I was struck by how naturally we had worked together to solve this problem. "There's one more thing," Logan said as we prepared to leave his office. "If we're going to do this, you need to understand that once it's over, everything changes. Ethan won't just be gone, he'll be completely destroyed. His reputation, his position in the family, his future. Everything. Are you prepared for that level of consequence?" I thought about all the needle marks on Sophia's arms, all the pain and fear I had seen in her eyes, all the ways Ethan had manipulated and controlled both of us in different timelines. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm prepared." The plan went into motion the following week. I began spending more time around Ethan, gradually building up his confidence that I was genuinely interested in helping him eliminate Logan. I fed him information about Logan's schedule, his eating habits, and his business meetings, all of it carefully crafted to serve our purposes. Meanwhile, Logan arranged for discreet security cameras to be installed throughout the house, particularly in the dining room and kitchen areas where Ethan would most likely attempt to introduce poison into our food. Sophia, unaware that her husband was planning to betray her as well, threw herself into learning the business with suspicious enthusiasm. Her thoughts revealed that she was trying to understand the Carter family's financial systems, so she could take control of everything once Logan and I were dead. The irony was almost amusing. She was working so hard to prepare for a future that would never come to pass. The trap was finally sprung on a Tuesday evening when Ethan suggested that the four of us have a family dinner together. He claimed it was to celebrate Sophia's progress in learning the business, but I could hear his real thoughts clearly. "Tonight's the night. By tomorrow morning, they'll both be dead." Sophia was equally excited, though for different reasons. "After dinner, I'll slip something into Ethan's drink too. Then I'll be the only one left standing." It was like watching two scorpions in a bottle, each convinced they were about to outwit the other. The dining room had been elegantly set with the family's finest china and crystal. Ethan had personally prepared several dishes, claiming he wanted to show off his cooking skills. The food looked and smelled delicious, but I knew it was probably laced with enough poison to kill a horse. As we sat down to eat, I caught Logan's eye across the table. He gave me an almost imperceptible nod, indicating that everything was in place. "This looks wonderful, Ethan," I said with a bright smile. "You really outdid yourself." "Thank you, sister-in-law. I made sure to use only the finest ingredients." The double meaning in his words would have been chilling if I hadn't been prepared for it. Logan raised his wine glass in a toast. "To family," he said, "and to getting what we deserve." We all lifted our glasses and drank. The wine tasted normal, which meant Ethan had probably focused his poisoning efforts on the food rather than the beverages. As the meal progressed, I made a show of eating enthusiastically while actually consuming as little as possible. Logan did the same, though he was much more subtle about it. After about 20 minutes, Logan suddenly clutched his chest and made a choking sound. I don't feel well," he gasped, then collapsed forward onto the table. I screamed and rushed to his side, playing the role of the panicked wife. Logan, what's wrong?" Sophia and Ethan both jumped up, but I could see the satisfaction in their eyes. Their plan was working perfectly, or so they thought. "Call an ambulance," I shouted, but even as I said it, I noticed that Logan's breathing was steady and his pulse was strong. He was clearly acting, and doing a very convincing job of it. That's when Mrs. Carter burst into the dining room, flanked by several security guards. "Nobody move," she commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority. Ethan's face went pale. "Mother, what's going on?" Logan collapsed. "We need to get him to a hospital." "What's going on?" Mrs. Carter said coldly. "Is that we've been watching you poison your brother." She gestured to one of the guards, who held up a tablet showing crystal-clear video footage of Ethan adding white powder to Logan's plate while we were all distracted by conversation. "The cameras captured everything, Ethan. Your attempt to murder the heir to this family, your plans to take over the business, even your discussions about how to dispose of the bodies." Sophia looked genuinely shocked. Apparently, Ethan hadn't shared the full extent of his surveillance preparations with her. "This is impossible," Ethan stammered. "The food isn't poison. Look, I'll eat it myself." Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a large spoonful of the dish he had prepared for Logan and shoved it into his mouth. Within seconds, his expression changed from defiant to horrified as he realized what he had done. The food was indeed poisoned with his own concoction. "You switched the plates," he whispered, staring at Logan in shock. Logan sat up slowly, perfectly healthy and very much alive. "I switched them while you were distracted by Susan's performance," he confirmed. "You've been eating your own poison for the past half hour." Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his stomach as the full effects of the toxin began to take hold. But how did you know?" "Because," Logan said calmly, "my wife is smarter than you gave her credit for, and more loyal than you could possibly understand." Mrs. Carter turned her attention to Sophia, who was still standing frozen in shock. "As for you, since you were clearly part of this conspiracy, you'll be joining your husband in whatever fate awaits him." "No!" Sophia screamed. "I didn't know. I had nothing to do with this." But the security footage told a different story. The cameras had captured her helping Ethan prepare the poisoned food, discussing their plans in what they thought were private moments, and even her own preparations to poison Ethan after he had killed us. As the guards moved to restrain both Sophia and Ethan, Logan stood up and straightened his tie. "The family rules are very clear about the punishment for attempting to murder the heir," he said dispassionately. "You'll both be permanently confined to the underground detention area. Food and water will be provided at our discretion." It was essentially a death sentence, just delivered with legal language and family tradition instead of outright execution. As they were dragged away, Sophia turned to look at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with hatred, but also with a kind of respect that I had never seen before. "You won," she said simply. "This time you actually won." After they were gone, Mrs. Carter turned to me with an expression of approval that I had never expected to see. "Susan, you've proven yourself to be a valuable member of this family. Your loyalty to Logan and your intelligence in uncovering this plot have not gone unnoticed." She paused, then added, "I'm increasing your stake in the business to 15%. You've earned it." 15% of the Carter family empire was more money than I had ever dreamed of having. It represented true financial independence and security for the rest of my life. But as I looked at Logan, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, I realized that money wasn't the only thing I had gained from this experience. Later that evening, after all the statements had been given and the legal paperwork had been filed, Logan and I found ourselves alone in our bedroom for the first time since the crisis had begun. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You saved mine too," I replied. "If you hadn't believed me and helped me plan this, Ethan would have killed both of us." Logan moved closer, and for the first time since our wedding night, the distance between us felt charged with something more than just business partnership. "Susan, I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph. It showed two children, a young girl with pigtails defending a slightly older boy with long hair from a group of bullies. My heart stopped as I recognized the scene. "Chase," I whispered. Logan nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've been looking for you for 15 years. When I heard that Susan Evans was going to marry into the Carter family, I hoped. But I couldn't be sure until I saw how you handled yourself. The girl who protected me on the playground grew up to be a woman who would risk everything to save my life. All those years of wondering what had happened to the gentle boy I had fallen for in elementary school, and he had been right here all along, hidden behind a reputation for coldness and cruelty. But why didn't you tell me who you were?" I asked. "Because I needed to know if you remembered me, if you cared enough to choose me over the easier path. When I heard your thoughts about saving up money to leave me." "You can hear my thoughts?" I interrupted, shocked. Logan smiled. "Just like you can hear everyone else's. I've had this ability since I was a child. It's how I knew Ethan was lying about his feelings, how I could tell that Sophia was planning something dangerous, and how I knew that despite everything, you genuinely cared about protecting me." The pieces fell into place like a puzzle solving itself. Logan's success in business, his ability to read people so accurately, His seeming immunity to manipulation, it all made sense if he could hear what people were really thinking. You've been testing me this entire time, I realized. Not testing, he corrected gently. Waiting. Hoping that the girl I fell in love with all those years ago had grown into someone I could spend my life with. He reached out and took my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. I know our marriage started as a business arrangement, he continued, but I'd like it to become something more. If you're willing. I looked into his eyes, the same dark eyes that had looked at me with such gratitude when I had stood up to his bullies all those years ago, and I knew my answer. Yes, I said simply.
I'm willing.
He leaned down and kissed me, gently at first, then with growing passion as years of separation and uncertainty melted away between us. For the first time in either of my lives, I felt truly safe. Not because someone was protecting me, but because I had found someone I could trust completely, someone who knew all my secrets and cared for me anyway. The next morning, I woke up in Logan's arms feeling more content than I had ever imagined possible. The man I had married out of necessity had turned out to be the love of my life, hidden beneath layers of family expectations and business obligations. But our happiness was interrupted by a knock at the bedroom door. "Sir, ma'am," came the voice of one of the household staff. "Mrs. Carter would like to see you both in her office immediately." We dressed quickly and made our way to Mrs. Carter's private study, wondering what new crisis might be developing. She was seated behind her massive wooden desk, looking every inch the family matriarch who had built an empire through sheer force of will. "Sit," she commanded, and we took the chairs across from her. "I've been thinking about yesterday's events," she began, "and I've come to some conclusions about the future of this family." Logan tensed beside me, probably preparing for some new test or challenge. First, Ethan's actions have made it clear that he was never fit to be part of this family's legacy. His assets will be redistributed, and his name will be removed from all official documents. She paused, studying both of us carefully. Second, Logan, your handling of this crisis has proven that you're ready to take full control of the family business. I'm officially retiring and naming you as my successor. This was huge news. Logan had been the heir apparent, but actually being named as the head of the family was a significant step that usually didn't happen until the previous generation died. And third, Mrs. Carter continued, turning her attention to me, "Susan, your actions have proven that you're not just a suitable wife for the family heir. You're exactly the kind of person this family needs to continue thriving for another generation." She opened a folder on her desk and pulled out several legal documents. "I'm transferring 25% of the family assets directly to you, independent of your marriage to Logan. You've earned the right to be a power in your own right, not just as someone's wife." I stared at the papers in shock. 25% of the Carter family wealth was more money than some small countries had in their entire treasury. "There is, however, one condition," Mrs. Carter added with a slight smile. Logan and I exchanged glances, waiting for the catch. "I want grandchildren. At least 3 of them. This family's future depends on the next generation, and I want to make sure that generation combines Logan's intelligence with your strength and loyalty." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Logan just laughed. "I think we can accommodate that request, Mother," he said, reaching over to take my hand. Mrs. Carter nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent. Now there's one more matter to address." She pressed a button on her desk, and moments later, 2 guards entered the room escorting a figure I barely recognized. It was Sophia, but she looked like she had aged 10 years in the past week. Her hair was stringy and unwashed, her clothes were dirty, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who had been living in genuine fear. "I've decided to offer you a choice, Sophia," Mrs. Carter announced. "You can remain in the detention area for the rest of your life, or you can accept permanent exile from this city, this country, and this family. You'll be given enough money to start over somewhere far away, but you'll never be allowed to return or contact any member of this family again." Sophia looked between Logan and me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the sister I had grown up with, scared, desperate, but still possessing a spark of the intelligence that had gotten her this far. "If I choose exile," she asked quietly, "what happens to Ethan?" "Ethan stays exactly where he is," Mrs. Carter replied coldly. "His crimes were more serious, and his punishments are permanent." Sophia nodded slowly. "Then I choose exile." As the guards prepared to escort her away, she looked at me one more time. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time in either of my lives, she sounded like she genuinely meant it. "For everything." I nodded, accepting her apology without forgiveness. Some things couldn't be undone with words, but at least she was finally acknowledging the harm she had caused. After she was gone, Mrs. Carter dismissed us with instructions to start planning our real wedding, a celebration that would announce Logan's new position and my acceptance as a full member of the family. 6 months later, we held that celebration in the same venue where we had first been married. But this time everything was different. This time, Logan was there from the beginning, standing beside me as we exchanged vows that meant something beyond business arrangements and family obligations. This time, when I promised to love, honor, and cherish him, I meant every word. The reception was everything our first wedding hadn't been: joyful, romantic, and filled with people who genuinely cared about our happiness. I danced with my husband under strings of lights that turned the evening into something magical, surrounded by friends and family members who saw us as a real couple, rather than just a business merger. But the most perfect moment came later, when we were alone in our bedroom, finally free to be completely honest with each other about everything we had experienced. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't been reborn?" Logan asked as we lay in bed, his arms wrapped around me. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I remember that we found each other again despite everything that tried to keep us apart. Some things are just meant to be." He kissed the top of my head. "I love you, Susan. I loved you when we were children. I loved you when I thought I'd lost you forever. And I'll love you for whatever comes next." "I love you too," I whispered back. "In this life and any other one that might come after." As I drifted off to sleep in the arms of the man who had been my childhood protector, my business partner, and now my true husband, I couldn't help but smile at the twisted path that had brought us to this moment. Death had given me a second chance at life, but more importantly, it had given me a second chance at love. And this time I was going to make sure that chance lasted forever. The universe might have a twisted sense of humor, but sometimes, just sometimes, that twisted humor works out exactly the way it's supposed to. Now, if you've made it this far in this wild journey of reincarnation, mind reading, and family drama, I bet you're wondering about your own second chances. Maybe you're thinking about the people in your life who deserve more trust, or the ones who've been showing you red flags that you've been ignoring. Here's what I learned from living twice. Pay attention to people's actions, not just their words. Trust your instincts even when they seem crazy. And never, ever underestimate the power of someone who's got nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. If this story grabbed you by the throat and didn't let go, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would do if you could hear everyone's thoughts for just one day. And hey, if you want more stories about people getting the revenge they deserve and the love they never saw coming, make sure you subscribe, because trust me, we're just getting started with these tales of justice served cold. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, and sometimes it's so much more satisfying than that.